Welcome to this short session on tearing down myths related to IT automation. My name is Aneej Mathai. I work as a principal consultant with Resolve Systems, and today we are going to look into three myths. Not that there are not more than three myths, but we will focus on these three. The first one is my ROI would be better than yours. IT automation seems to promise the moon for us, and we will see whether that is true or not. Second, every tool out there is makes the same claim. So there is a myth that they're all intrinsically the same, and we will see they are not. And the third is there is a frenzy to automate everything, and we want to automate it fully in the sense that we want to automate end to end. And there we are going to see whether we need to consider human intervention, okay, and have an hybrid model. But we will look into all these three one behind the other. So the first myth is my ROI is going to be greater than yours. So we need to examine the playing field that we operate in. Now, there have been always tall claims, and you would find many of them, and all of them are true in some sense. But then the question is, when you have been asked to do an automation project, what is the likelihood that you can bypass the benefits that others have got? Can your ROI be the same, or can they exceed? And for that, we need to examine the playing field, which we will do using a particular survey done by McKinsey Global Institute. And here I have listed down the industries. And on the x-axis, we see that on the far right, those industries are less automatable than the ones on the far left. Now, remember, this is not to say that some industries are not automatable at all. No, it just means that everything is automatable, but then the extent you can automate can vary based on the domain you operate. Similarly, in the same domain, you could have multiple activities that also vary in terms of what can be more automatable than others. And so we know that the playing field is not even, and so your ROI is most likely not comparable, but we will see in some more details. Now here I have listed down some numbers, and if you see the in the industry that is more automatable than others, which is accommodation and food service, on your far right, if you look at the color code, you see that 48% of time is spent on activities that can be automated using the current tools and technology. Whereas if you go to your far left, you see with regard to managing people, only 2% of time is spent on those activities that can be automated using current tools. And on your top, you see the average across industries. Similarly, you have, if you look at the educational services, you would see on your far right the predictable physical activities, your chance of automating 7% of them, or 7% of time is spent on activities that can be automatable. But if you look at the score, it's around maybe 65%. But if you come up to the far left, 22% of time can be is spent on activities that can be automatable to maybe around 30 or 15%. Okay. Of course, we are going to look into information technology, which is a broad spectrum of activities. Um, so, so here we have broken down the first myth, that in that you can just get about the same number as someone else. Your ROI is heavily dependent on the domain that you work in, and also the activities that you do within that particular domain. So that is tearing down the first myth, that everyone would get similar ROI. No, it is always based on which domain you work and what activity you do. So now coming on to the second myth, every tool is just about the same and they are intrinsically the same, and we will examine them and see how different they are. Now, let's look into the activities first, and then we will see the tools that fall in place. Now, on your far right, you see activities that are very predictable in nature, whereas the ones on the left are less predictable. And the question is, where does a rule-based engine fit in? And they all fit in into addressing the predictable flow. You would have seen, even when you go on vacation, you can set a rule for your email application to send out of office reminders during a particular duration. That is a simple example of a rule based serial sequence of steps that you configure, and the system automatically sends uh, out of office reminders. But how do we handle unpredictable flow? And that's where the nature of unpredictability by itself brings about complexity, and we need to have some sort of a human intervention in managing those activities. So those fall into a category known as ITP, and we will see these two terms shortly. What is RPA? RPA stands for Robotic Process Automation. It has nothing to do with robots. They just we are talking about robot software as robots. Okay. Now RPA, you can, when you examine tools, you would see that some tools are biased towards catering more for the actions done by an end user. It could be in terms of your user interface. It could be in terms of screen scraping. You may, given a URL, you can go and screen scrape it, pick some value, and put it into another application and almost imitate an end user. Or it could also be in terms of a back office processing, like handling claims, where um, you have well defined predictable flows, but they all, in most cases, they relate to handling, getting the input in a very automated manner and processing them. If we look at the other category of tools, which is called ITPA, IT Process Automation, um, there the target audience is not end users. It is more for the IT team itself to make life easy for them. But then they deal with a lot of unpredictable flows. Now, it could be in terms of monitoring the infrastructure and taking corrective actions. It may be in terms of managing incidents, and resolving those incidents. So, in such scenarios, you would need to integrate with many tools. You need to also collaborate with business and evaluate your actions in terms of business outcomes. And so you would most likely need to have a human intervention that would guide you and that will prompt you for, or make some recommendations for you to act on. Now, the complexity that comes about is the fact that all tools claim to do it all. So you would have an ITPA tool that claims to do RPA, and an RPA tool that claims to do ITPA. So that would confuse the buyer or the customer. But what we need to know is tools are intrinsically either RPA or ITPA. They will be very good in their core strength in terms of ability to integrate with tools, collaborate with the business layer, but they may not be good in terms of screen scraping. Or other tools could be very good in screen scraping, but they will have challenges integrating with other applications in a very heterogeneous environment. So you should be aware of them, um, and you should be able to choose a tool that is no, that addresses your pain point. So you always begin from what use cases you want to automate, and then of course you would use a tool that is appropriate to your use case. So not all tools are the same. We have tear down the myth that tools are all same, they all would do the same thing, but they are not. You need to sort of identify them and choose wisely. Okay, the third myth that we are going to see is we want to automate everything and we want to do it end to end. And the question is, do we want to consider a human factor? Now, when you think of your IT automation journey, you always want to consider carefully the use cases that you pick for automating. Okay, you don't want to go behind low hanging fruits. You want to pick those use cases which will impact business outcomes. You may be removing some constraints, or you may be improving upon the performance in terms of by automating them. So you want to be careful there in terms of choosing your use case, but you always begin there. And then as much as possible, you want to automate everything. Okay, you want to consider all the options in the flows. Now that can be complex because your flow by itself may be a very complex one. So you always want to pursue end-to-end automation. Okay, but we know that many of the business processes or IT processes are complex by nature. You may want to handle them differently at different times. There may be exceptions, so you always want to, once you have automated as much as you can, you want to also leave space for human intervention. Now, I'm not trying to say that every use case should have human intervention, but your complex flows will mandate human intervention. So, as we see in the car industry also, up until now, we have done a pretty good job, but we still want to have a human being sitting behind the wheel and making a course correction if needed. So we do not be under the impression that just because you automated everything end to end, that is the end of it. You also want to look into your use cases and see which of those need human intervention, and then of course do it appropriately. So this is a summary of what we did. We just tear down three myths. One is about the ROI. We realized that your ROI is directly related to your activities and the domain you operate in. We also tore down the myth number two, which says which speaks that all tools are intrinsically the same. They are not. They are either ITPA or RPA, although they can always overlap and do a little of the other. Okay, and the third one is there's a frenzy to automate everything end to end. No, we do not want to automate everything. We only want to automate those that deliver business value. And we also want to consider the human intervention. We do not want our automation to be inefficient because of the lack of human intervention. Okay, so in our next session, I will do a demo on human guided automation, but that is next time. Thank you. Bye.